Exclusively on Secular Media Network, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined by my co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Hey, I've got some trivia for the listeners.
Oh, God.
Before we start. So did you know that Callie's full first name is actually Calliope? And actually,
I did. I was aware of that.
Well, you knew that, but the listeners, I don't know if they did, because you never go by Calliope, you only go by Callie.
Right, that's fair.
But the really interesting part is that my full first name is actually Ariophanes.
Is it? Really?
Yeah, it is, for real.
Because I'm pretty sure I saw the screenshot of your name change form, and it didn't say Ariophanes.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to put that on there, so I went back later to the judge, and I was like, can you change this? And he was like, oh, okay, you don't have to pay the extra, $350 and do the whole deal over again, because I'm nice, so you can be Ariophanes, I guess.
Oh, fair enough.
There you go.
So, is there a meaning behind that, or is it just something that sounds cool?
It just sounds badass.
I mean, it does. It does sound badass.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, that's how I do things.
Because you're a badass.
I just do it for the badassness.
All right. Fair enough. So before we jump into the show, one thing, we are going to be at the Reason Rally, Ari and I both, along with tens of thousands of our closest friends. And so a lot of podcasts do wrap-up episodes after those kinds of things, and I don't know that I'm so much interested in just talking about how it was for an hour. So what I want to do is,
I'm pretty interested in that.
Well, that's fine. You can do that.
I'll do my spin-off show finally, since everyone's getting spin-off shows. I have to do mine now.
Oh,
hint, Jeremiah.
Right.
Trying to convince him, he won't do it.
But what I really want to do is I want to meet up with people there and just hear people's stories. Take 5-10 minutes, whatever you're comfortable with, and I want to hear your story, whatever your story means to you. If it's your story of coming out, if it's your story of deconversion, if it's your story of how you overcame something.
Maybe the time you found $5.
Right, yeah. I mean, anything exciting like that. So if you're interested in meeting up, the gaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com, shoot me an email and we'll figure something out. Because what I would really love to do is to just do kind of a montage episode after the Reason Rally of the stories of some of the people that we meet. So there's that. So this week we're gonna have a conversation that's a little bit different than what we normally do. The episode may turn out to be So, and it may turn out a little bit shorter because we're having a very specific conversation about a very specific thing, but I think it's a really important conversation to have. So we're talking a lot about the trans bathroom debate on this show, which honestly I think is ridiculous because that is so not the reason that I got into activism. I really, really am not super into having a conversation about where and how I pee. But that's where we're at.
A lot of things, but that is not one of them.
Right. Yeah, that's the sex episode from a while ago, if you're curious. But that's where we're at. So, that's the conversation that we end up having a lot. And our guest this week is someone who I saw post something on Facebook saying that she had actually been assaulted in a bathroom and felt like she needed to tell her story. So, Emily, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Yay!
So, why don't you just go ahead and tell us your story?
Okay, so my sophomore year of college, I was headed to the university center or whatever, and I decided to stop and go to the bathroom as one does. And so I'm in there, I'm washing my hands and everything, and a man comes into the bathroom and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, like I didn't mean to do that." I'm like, "Oh no, it's fine, whatever, it happens." And so he went out and then he came back in and he's like, "Actually, the men's is locked, can I just come in for a second?" And I was like, okay, whatever. And so he came in and he like went into the stall and I'm like, okay, I guess this is fine, like I need to get out. So I finish washing my hands and I'm about to leave, and then he comes out of the stall and he goes to the door, but then he turns around and he's like, "So where's your boyfriend at?" And once that is said, how the conversation is about to go.
Right.
So I was literally just like, "No, this is not happening. This is not happening." And long story short, he blocked the door and he ended up kind of cornering me and stuff like that. Luckily, I was able to like wiggle my way around. He had his hand on the door, keeping it closed, but somehow I was able to wiggle around and get out. So, I ended up going to the LGBTQ center. That was the first place I saw, and I found out that the guy had been in there previously, and he was in there just to get a bunch of condoms, which wasn't reassuring at all. And I guess he had been in a couple other student centers that are doing the exact same thing. And so they called UCPD or the police department, and they came and they interviewed me and everything else, and I didn't hear anything about it. And then a few hours later, I found out that he had assaulted like 3 other girls on campus that day, and like out in broad daylight. So luckily, nothing too crazy happened to me in the bathroom, but all of the different possibilities, like...
Well, and that's still a pretty upsetting experience because...
Right.
Because, I mean, there are obviously a million things going through your head at that point, and none of them good.
Yeah. And, like, I feel like I tend to minimize what happened, because it wasn't,
Right.
But, yeah, it was still really terrifying. And, I mean, I didn't know what was about to happen. But I ended up having to, like, look at a lineup, and I ended up having to go to court for it and testify and everything with another woman. And, that was traumatic as well, having to see him again, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, that wasn't that bad. That was fine, whatever. Mm-hmm. But once I saw him walking into the courtroom, I freaked out, and it was a lot worse than I was expecting. But, yeah, the judge ended up saying that he was banned from the surrounding area. And he is now on the National Sex Offender Registry.
So, at least the best outcome one could hope for from a situation like that. Obviously, it's better for it to not have happened at all, but it seems like it was at least handled in a responsible way.
Right, yeah. I was actually surprised by how quickly and well everything was handled. But, yeah, like, the police were really cooperative, like... you hear all kinds of awful stories about the police just not doing anything, but luckily they were really awesome. So,
well, that's great. Because so much of the time that's not the story you hear. You hear, we had a couple weeks ago a trans guy friend of mine say that he was assaulted in a bathroom, and when he tried to report it, the person that he reported it to said, "Wait a minute, you were where? You better let this go before I press charges on you."
Oh my God.
For being in the quote-unquote wrong place. Yeah, so it's just, we very obviously have a problem, not only with the fact that assaults happen, but how they're handled after.
Yeah.
And so... When you posted this on Facebook, what did you have in mind? What were you trying to accomplish with this?
Well, I just have so many thoughts on it. I don't even know. Just as the whole excuse that everyone's been using to basically just make everyone so afraid, and everything is, it's just a bunch of guys being like, oh, well, my wife or my sister, just, we have to protect all these women in the bathroom or from these awful trans people, you know? And like, first of all, like, if a criminal, an awful person wants to do something like that, they're going to anyway. That's why they're a criminal. But since then, you know, I've been super involved in the LGBTQ community. I have all kinds of friends who are a wide variety of identities, and we have all been in the bathroom together and nothing happened. It was totally fine. And it's some of the things that I can think of are just super stereotypical experiences of one time before a drag show, I was helping a trans woman figure out how to put on her makeup. Like, that's what we're doing in the bathroom. Like, we don't need you to come in and like flip out, you know? So I don't know. They're just, these politicians and conservatives and everything, they don't understand, and they're just using this group of people who they don't understand as an excuse. Not only, well,
you know, I see it as them, you know, not only using trans people as a weapon, you know, because they don't understand trans people, but I also think that it's pretty disgusting that they're using assault victims in that way. Because, you know, it would be a different story if they had a very long history of doing everything they could to take care of people who experience these kind of things, but that's frankly not the case. You know, so often the story that we hear is those are the exact people who are saying that, you know, you should carry your rapist baby, or what were you wearing, or, you know, what else do you expect when you're drunk, and those kinds of things. You know, now all of the sudden they care about sexual assault when it's, you know, when it's convenient and when it can be used as a weapon against other people. So, I mean, when you hear that happening as a person this has happened to, how does that make you feel?
Well, to be frank, it's just total bullshit.
Right.
Like I said, they don't want to deal with the real underlying issues of sexual assault in this country and elsewhere, so they're just making something up because they don't want to deal with the real issues, or think, oh, well, maybe there's something else going on, and maybe it's really not these people's fault. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think it does. I think a lot of it comes down to the idea that the people who commit sexual assault are somehow different than like the normal everyday average person, right? Because so many times when somebody does something horrible like that, what you hear so often is like, oh, he seemed so nice, he was a good dad or a good husband, and that kind of stuff. And you know, frankly, a lot of times they are those people in most of their life. And but there's this side of them that, you know, craves that power, and they exercise it. And I think that's a really tough thing for people to wrap their heads around, because they would rather it be a black and white issue of, you know, this person is a predator, so we can point to that person as a predator. That person's nothing like me.
Right. They're trying to villainize trans people.
Exactly. Because, well, because it's, you know, trans people are a question mark. You know, you can, you know, the first thing that a lot of people are hearing about trans people ever is that they're either coming after your kids, or they're making it easier for people to come after your kids. You know, because, well, so let me put this to you. So, obviously, I feel like we pretty thoroughly debunked the idea of the trans person as the sexual predator. But what do you say to the argument that, you know, because what you hear a lot of times is, well, I don't think trans people are a threat. What I'm afraid of is someone pretending to be, to get into a bathroom. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because my whole thing is, I'm actually scared that now people that are criminals and want to hurt people are going to use this as an excuse, and it's just another way for them. They're like misplacing the blame, and I'm just afraid that someone's going to dress up and do this, and that's my biggest fear with that whole thing.
That it's like putting the idea in someone's head.
Yeah,
maybe?
exactly. Yeah, literally exactly that. Yeah.
Well, and you see that, the American Family Association, I think, is the group that was actually sending men into the restrooms of Targets to try and test their policy.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like proving that conservative men are the only people who are actually the threat here.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's an interesting. Go ahead, Ari.
I was going to say that's the thing that struck me so much about Emily's story is that the people who are trying to put these laws on the books, their argument is if we don't explicitly ban people from using certain restrooms, then, for example, a man can go into a woman's restroom and just waltz in there and assault anyone he wants, and there's no consequences. But that wouldn't have had any impact on Emily's situation because the guy was clearly being manipulative. He walked into the restroom. Mm-hmm. And, asked if he could use the restroom because the other one was supposedly locked. Mm-hmm. And if, he asked if he could be in there. And she, of course, wasn't suspecting any kind of ill intent at that point. So she said, sure, being a nice, trusting person. So, it wouldn't have stopped that situation at all. And I don't know how common that kind of situation is in these sorts of scenarios.
Well, what the more common situation is that I have found, because... on the new Gaytheist Manifesto blog on Patheos, shameless plug.
Plug.
One of the things that I'm doing is a comprehensive allies guide to the bathroom debate, because that's a thing that apparently is needed. And one of the articles that I'm working on right now is the second part of that. And what I'm finding is almost universally what happens is men assaulting young boys in men's bathrooms.
That's why we need to do what Trav says and ban the straight, cis, men from going into the public restrooms. Yes. I am totally on board with that.
Shout out to Trav Mamone from the By Any Means podcast. I'm going to try my best to remember to link their article in the notes. But basically, it's a satire piece saying that what we really need to do is we need to ban cisgender men from public bathrooms, which is fantastic, and apparently gotten a ton of blowback on.
Yeah,
which is
some people don't know what satire is, apparently.
Well,
it was even subtitled "A Modest Proposal." Come on, can't get that much more explicit.
Yeah, so it's just interesting that no one's ever had the conversation or wanted to have the conversation. Well, what about convicted male sex offenders in bathrooms with young boys? What are we doing about that? What are we doing about any of these things? I mean, it's frustrating. One of the other articles that I'm working on, all I have for it is the title, because the content is kind of hard, but the title is "Now That You Suddenly Care About Sexual Assault." Mm-hmm. And it's going to be kind of a manifesto to Republicans and what they think here. So it's just, it's interesting because there was an organization, I think it was like 250 different domestic violence centers, like rape crisis centers, people who do prevention and response as their career, their profession, their life's work. And they put out this 14-page letter saying that, this is the wrong response to this problem. That, trans people are not the threat and, in fact, are more likely to be victims than they are perpetrators. And that, that the evidence is not where these people are in the bathroom debate. And it's just...
Shocker. Conservatives don't care about evidence.
Right. Honestly, as someone who has been sexually assaulted twice, I am... actually kind of offended that, instead of listening to my real concerns and people like me's real concerns about what the actual problem is, instead they're targeting people who are my friends, good people, so that's what pisses me off the most. Yeah.
One of the best things that I've seen is there was a meme that said, if we're really going to do this, what's to stop a cisgender man from claiming to be a trans man and that he actually has a vagina, so he has to go into the women's bathroom?
See, there are so many...
I had not seen that one.
Yeah, that one kind of blew my mind.
I had never thought of that, but going off what I said earlier, there are so many different ways that people can now like manipulate this situation and use it to their own advantage,
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, and I think that kind of brings to light the fact that most of society doesn't think that transmasculine people exist.
Hey, here I am.
Right. And
I'm just invisible in every way.
Right. Which is why I feel super ambiguous about the whole here's a picture of a trans man bodybuilder. Do you want him in the bathroom with your daughters? Mm-hmm.
Sure, I don't care. Let him in.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's my first no, I don't really care. But that's also kind of playing into the fear mongering. Do you want him in the bathroom? And that's acknowledging that equals a threat, or that's something that you should be afraid of. So, but it also lays out the point pretty clearly that conservatives very clearly do not care or care to know about anything other than trans women, because
David Smalley recently had an episode where he played audio from a city council meeting in Rockwall, Texas, where they were discussing an ordinance to ban people who have certain genitals from using certain restrooms or whatever based on your birth certificate. And he played audio from people who were against it and people who were for it. And the people who wanted the ordinance, guess how many of them mentioned transmasculine people at all?
Not a single one.
0
I'm guessing.
people.
And wasn't there?
I don't want men in the women's bathroom.
Right. Well, and wasn't there a young trans man that actually stood up and gave testimony there?
Yeah, he couldn't play that audio, unfortunately, because I think the guy was a teenager, and confidentiality
privacy
issues and stuff.
Privacy and all that.
He did mention that a young trans guy who's a teenager gave a talk and ended up getting really emotional and crying, and I can understand that for sure.
Oh yeah. There was another one that I saw that was, it was great to see this kid tell a story and stand up for himself, and it was another one. It was a young trans man talking to the city council and giving his testimony or whatever, and and he talked for 2 minutes. They cut him off, which is whatever. You get 2 minutes to talk, whatever. But they praised him and thanked him for his courage, told him he was super brave and that he was awesome for standing up, and then turned around and voted against him.
Of course.
I was that was that's the definition of why I don't really want to get involved in politics. When people ask me, not all the time, but people ask me sometimes about political stuff, and I'm just look, political activism is super important. That's not my activism, because I'm too I'm not diplomatic enough for that. I don't know. I guess I could be if I wanted to be. It would just be really, really frustrating.
Callie Wright for human president.
Human president. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie. There was a minute where I was actually thinking about trying to run for some kind of elected office, but I just no.
Yeah, that'll destroy your faith in humanity in about 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I had any to begin with, of course.
Whatever shred you were holding on to, it's now blown away in the dust.
Right. Well, Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show to share, to share your story, share your experience, share your thoughts. I think one of the things that we do so often in these debates is we kind of talk over the people who actually have a stake in the debate. We argue over the politics and we argue over the laws and that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's kind of easy to get caught up in like making sure you've got your argument straight and forget that we're actually talking about something that has consequences for real people living real lives. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation. And I definitely appreciate you, being honest, being open, and being willing to share your perspective and for your allyship. So thank you very much.
Yeah, totally. Of course. I'm glad I could share.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ari and I are going to have a super fun discussion about what happens when we get angry. You won't like us when we're angry. More Gaytheist Manifesto right after this.
What's up, everyone? My name is Jamie, and I'm with an organization called A Voice for the Innocent. We are a community of support for people who are affected by sexual violence. We are super excited to announce that we have partnered with the Vans Warped Tour to launch the Save Our Scene campaign. It's an initiative to reduce sex crimes in the music industry, and we've been working tirelessly to make sure it's as powerful as it can be. We've written an in-depth training for the bands on the tour to help them better understand the scope of the problem and learn how they can be part of the solution. We've done hours upon hours of research to compile every last resource we can find for people who have experienced sexual violence. We then took these resources, sorted them by location, and created state-specific free literature to hand out to music fans at every date of Warped. On top of that, we will be reaching out to people at every stop to let them know that we are another resource for them, and if they have a story to tell, we have a place where people will listen. This is, quite frankly, the largest project we have ever taken on, and we are extremely excited to have this opportunity, but we need your help. Sending 2 people on tour costs money, not to mention the cost of printing literature for every date on top of all the materials we will need to make our campaign have the largest impact possible. This includes a tent, merchandise bins, dollies, and all the other odds and ends that come with touring and implementing this campaign. We are asking for your donations. Anything you can give will get us closer to our goal of reaching as many people on the tour as possible. To donate or to learn more, visit saveourscene.org. Thank you to everyone who is able to help us in this endeavor. And as always, thank you so much to those of you who have already helped us along the way. Hopefully we will see you out at Warped Tour.
The staff of Secular Coalition for America lobbies U.S. Congress on issues of separation of church and state, and they've become a powerhouse for change in the United States government. You'll definitely want to subscribe to receive their email action alerts. These are updates for important issues and ones that you can get involved with directly. And hopefully, you'll consider making a contribution to the Secular Coalition for America to help them continue fighting for your equality. You can do it all at secular.org.
And welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. So, this segment, what I wanted to talk about is the topic of dealing with anger. So, in the last episode, we had a conversation about mental health with JT and Dr. Lack, and one thing that I noticed that was missing from that conversation was the topic of anger and how anger can be a manifestation of those things, or And there's also a good social justice element to anger, because anger is something that's often policed. It's something that's often seen as a wholly negative thing. You shouldn't act in anger, blah blah blah. So I have a Facebook friend posted something asking people, how do you feel about anger? How do you deal with anger? How do you feel you're allowed to express anger? And that kind of got me thinking, really. And I'm working on a post for the blog about anger and how anger is policed, because what happens a lot of times is, in conversations surrounding social justice and especially in our wheelhouse and atheism and LGBTQ issues, so much of the discourse is about telling people to calm down and to stop being angry and to be nicer, to be more polite. And like, part of me gets that, but part of me is also like, shut the hell up. So, Ari, what are your thoughts?
Well, there are so many things that go along with this. I guess recently with, like we were talking about in the last segment, all the trans bathroom bills and stuff, it's really brought up a lot of conversation around trans issues that wasn't happening before, which is a good thing and then also not a good thing.
Well, and it's not the conversation that we're trying to have.
Right. Like you always talk about, Callie, how visibility can be a positive and a negative. It can be a positive because it gets people thinking, it gets people questioning their previously held beliefs, but then it also brings out, the antis and the haters and that kind of thing, and that's something that I've been seeing a lot of. So, previously, before all this stuff happened, you'd see transphobic stuff online and hear people say transphobic stuff, but I have the luxury of being able to tune that out and, living with and being around people who are, for the most part, very supportive of me and are not raging assholes. So, whenever
not being a raging asshole is good.
Yeah, that is a guarantee for being my friend.
We want to not be that.
So, I have the luxury of, at least before, of being able to, if I saw something that made me angry, just step away and turn it off. Now, with so many of these types of conversations happening, I am seeing way more of this negativity and hatred and ignorance of trans people than I had in the past, and it's getting a lot harder for me to not be angry about it.
Me too.
Yeah, I actually shared a post the other day that was sort of along these lines. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, I'm actually, as we're recording this, I'm searching for a Facebook post that's an illustration of this because, I posted something on Facebook. Anyone who's friends with me on Facebook probably saw, I posted something that was like, please don't stop tagging me into these conversations, but also please don't think that I'm ignoring you or be offended if I don't answer. Exactly. Because of how exhausted I am with so much of this crap.
Yeah, I found the post.
Says. Go for it.
It's shared from the Queer Feminist Bitch, which is an interesting name for a page.
I'm immediately interested.
Yes. I used to think it was fun and interesting to get into debates about feminism or racism, or in general challenge people's bigotry and prejudice and call them out. But recently it's become a burden. It's a chore now. I no longer want to debate about whether or not I should have basic human rights. This shouldn't even be a fucking issue anymore. I no longer go into these discussions with an open mind and lighthearted demeanor. Now I'm fucking furious. I should not have to defend my humanity at every single step repeatedly and constantly. I'm done. And my comment on this when I shared it was, I feel this more and more every day, and I'm pretty privileged for a trans person. Take care of yourselves out there, everyone.
Yes, actually, I remember seeing that now. And, I feel like that sums it up pretty well. I think, so much of this comes back to privilege, as it typically does. It's easy to tell people to calm down when you're not the one who's constantly being asked to justify your humanity.
Exactly.
There is a level at which we want to be able to disagree with people and stay friendly. And, there's something to be said for doing that, but I also kind of refuse to accept this idea that every disagreement is simply a disagreement. When someone is advocating against me having equal access to society, that's not simply a disagreement. That's a person literally expressing the fact that I'm less human and less worthy than they are. Mm-hmm. That's not a simple disagreement. I'm not going to smile in that person's face and shake their hand and say, oh, thanks. Part of the thing that kind of made me think that I may be a little too angry to productively have these discussions. A friend of mine shared a post where, I'd been interviewed on a local news station here about the Obama administration handing down the guidelines to how to treat trans kids in schools. And it was mostly like, sure, hey, Callie's in the news. I love her, represent. And I'm like, yay, like that's my friend and he's happy for me. And so it's awesome. And some asshole on his post comes in, as the father of a 7-year-old daughter, I can tell you that this goes way too far when it added quote-unquote locker rooms. I don't know why locker rooms got scare quotes. First one to expose my preteen daughter to male genital parts will most likely get a free surgery to change their sex.
Oh, I did see that. I remember this.
Yeah, so my response was, yay, violence, and trans people are the real threat, of course. And his response was, what parent wouldn't get violent if they needed to protect their child? And I said, cool, so the mere presence of someone in a place you think they don't belong justifies violence? That's a fantastic lesson for a 7-year-old. And, yeah, and it just kind of went downhill from there. And, you know, I mean, the argument went exactly how you think the argument went. And then yeah, so we've already dropped a couple of F-bombs, so it's fine at this point. So we're going on and on and on, and he's talking about, you know, being scared of the very idea of his daughter finding out that penises exist. And
oh no.
Yeah, and and where I started to lose it, I said, Jesus fucking Christ forbid you have to have a conversation with your child about human anatomy. Your inadequacies as a parent aren't my problem, dude.
Damn.
And then where is my last one? So, you know, again, it goes as you think it does, and I'm talking about the threat being a boogeyman riled up thing here. And okay, so here we go. I grew up the child of a single parent. When I was a kid, I lived my life as a boy. Because my mom was a good parent, when she had to go to the bathroom, she took me with her. I noticed she always sat down to pee and asked why. She said, well, boys and girls have different parts. And that was seriously the extent of the conversation. Heaven forbid you become a single parent to your daughter, or are out somewhere with her by yourself and have to go to the bathroom. Sorry, sweetheart, I have to leave you alone out here with all of these strangers while I go to the bathroom because I can't handle the thought of you seeing a body part and having to have the most basic of conversations about human anatomy with you. Top-notch parenting right there.
Also, what kind of bathrooms are you going into that people are flashing their genitals at one another?
Well, right.
This has not happened.
Yeah. So, and his response was, so at what age do you consider it appropriate to have a conversation about anatomy with a child? And can you honestly say there will never be a pervert use this to get their victim in a close quarters situation? And this is where I kind of went down. One, I'm guessing it's different with each child because children are unique human beings with minds of their own. I figured it out when I was like 8, and shockingly, it wasn't a traumatic experience. You don't have to talk about fucking to teach a kid that different people have different parts. And 2, no, I can't honestly say that with 100% certainty. What I can tell you is that it's never happened thus far. There are literally millions of people sexually assaulted every year that we do fuck all about. So I'm a little curious why I'm supposed to give up my civil rights for something that 1, never happens, and 2, isn't really ever perpetrated by people who are trans. Why are we talking about limiting the rights of trans people when trans people are disproportionately more likely to be victimized by you than the other way around? You love talking about numbers and percentages, so let's go there for a second. Almost every sexual predator turns out to be a straight white male. So why are we not talking about limiting your access? Why are we totally cool with convicted male sex offenders sharing bathrooms with our young boys without railing against them? I'll take a stab in the dark at the answer. It's because you don't really give two shits about sexual violence. You have no idea who the victims or perpetrators generally are, or the circumstances in which these things happen. What it comes down to is the fact that trans people make you uncomfortable. It's easy to demonize us, shit on us, and say you don't give a shit about our civil rights because we're a group of people you don't understand and you don't want to. We're an easy scapegoat because of the climate of complete and willful ignorance that surrounds our community. So if you're gonna go there, just own it, dude. You'd rather get all riled up about a group of people you don't understand because it makes you feel like a big-time top dog alpha male than develop even a modicum of understanding of the problem of sexual violence or the trans community. If you had the slightest fucking clue what you were talking about, you'd realize you're arguing against a problem that doesn't exist while completely ignoring the ones that I do. Am I in the ballpark?
Meow.
And then I unfollowed the post, so I didn't see anything after that.
I don't think that you necessarily went too far there with the anger because You know, a lot of times when people think about like angry conversations like this, it's just a bunch of name calling and you're stupid, you don't know anything, and you're a whatever slur. But you actually had, facts and data and information to convey on your side, where the anger was just kind of the passion behind it. And I think even if it turned that guy off to the conversation, I'm sure there were lots of people reading who really appreciated it and maybe even had their minds changed by something.
Yeah, and in fairness there, I'm not even necessarily saying that I think I maybe went too far there. I think it was more saying that I was letting my anger direct things a little bit more than I might have otherwise. And I'm not even necessarily saying that's a bad thing. It's just something that I kind of noticed was happening. And and this was also the point where someone else, and again, people who follow me on Facebook might have seen me allude to this. There was a person who used to be one of my best friends in the entire world, someone that I was in a band with for a long time, and was kind of like my musical right-hand person for years and years and years. And by most accounts, a pretty good guy. He was pretty racist, and that annoyed me, and we argued over it a lot. But aside from that, he was a halfway decent guy, and I got a message from another friend of mine saying that I had hurt his name's Elijah. I don't fucking care.
Fuck you, Elijah.
And like he's ever gonna listen to this show. And if he does, go fuck yourself. So a mutual friend of ours sent me a message and was like, "You hurt Elijah's feelings," and I was like, "Sweet, I'm hearing about it from someone that other than him. Cool." So I was like, what did I do? And he's like, "You unfriended him." And I was like, and I even, like, for a second I was like, you know what? I'm not even sure I remember why I unfriended him. I pull up his Facebook page. Trump meme, anti-trans, racist, Trump meme. Oh yeah, I remember now. So I eventually I just blocked him. And and then the other thing I saw was a post where he was complaining about people unfriending him, and he deliberately dead named me. So that was fun. So I just...
If you unfriend somebody who's saying things that you disagree with, then that means that you're anti-free speech and you are not willing to question your own positions. So I think that you need to surround yourself with people that make you angry and sad all the time, because that's the only way that you're ever going to learn to talk to people.
Because discourse.
If you just stay in your little SJW circle jerk, in your little liberal elite Ivy Tower, you got to talk to the real people, Callie.
Right. You're so right. So one of the things that I saw was he posted this meme that I'm sure people have seen about, the person who's leading the fight for bathroom access in North Carolina is a convicted sex offender. Okay. So first of all, there is a person in North Carolina who is a gay man, who is a convicted sex offender, who was quoted like 3 words in a newspaper saying that he was against the bathroom bill. So of course that means he's the leader, right?
Yep.
To conservatives. And so he had shared this meme. And so I was feeling pretty worked up after this conversation with this asshole on that Facebook post. And I remembered that, wow, I remember Elijah bragging about cheating on girls. And I'm pretty sure I remember him talking about having sex with girls that he was pretty sure were underage. So this piece of shit is talking about me and how I'm the problem. And so like I went and I did some research via Snopes, because Snopes is fantastic. And so I found all this out about this guy. Like he is a convicted sex offender, not a good thing. But he's by no means a leader of anything. He's just a person who happened to be quoted in a newspaper saying, "I don't like HB2."
I can see the headlines now. Callie Wright defends sex offender.
Oh, exactly. So in this guy's in this guy's crime happened 26 years ago. He was punished for it and apparently hasn't reoffended. So like, I'm not excusing what he did, but like, come on. Like, if you're gonna push forward a situation that's an illustration of a problem, this is not that situation. So I linked the Snopes article And I said, actually, you know what? I'm going to pull the screenshot up so I make sure I get my quote right, because I felt pretty good about this. Because I was just done. You know, like, it's one thing to hold a position. It's another thing to, like, demonize and vilify people when, you know, basically you're projecting about what a piece of shit you used to be. So what you're really worried about is other people treating your kid the way you used to treat other people's kids. So
I like how this is turning into the Callie rant hour.
Yeah. So my post was, if we're going to grandstand about something someone did 26 years ago, can we go ahead and have a conversation about all the times you fucked girls that were probably underage, or how many times you cheated on basically every girl you dated? Let that sink in a minute. And
that is the ultimate smackdown.
Oh, it was great. And I was really hoping that he would respond, and he ended up just blocking me, which is fine. So
you
yeah,
hurt his little feelings.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure he went to whoever, you know, cause like on that post where he said that, you know, he was complaining that I and a couple other people had unfriended him. Someone was like, sometimes standing up for what you believe in means standing alone. and I'm just like, oh my God, I bet you're feeling so good about yourself right now, sweetheart, for standing up for all the bigoted shit you believe in. Like, just bless your heart, you know? I bet you're feeling so good, and then someone comes along and clicks the unfriend button. Mind you, when I unfriended him, I did not make a stink about it. I just clicked the unfriend button. I didn't comment on anything. I didn't say anything to him. I'm just like, yeah, probably
How
not.
How would he even know that you unfriended him unless he went looking for you? Because it doesn't give you a notification.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, he's that kind of person, and I mean, he had a history of being flaky and like complaining to other people about things like you know, when someone would hurt his feelings, the person who hurt his feelings was always the last person to hear about it. He would always complain to everyone else. It was just, yeah.
Which is why someone else messaged you saying you hurt his feelings.
Yeah, which is, yeah. So, you know, burn, Elijah, go to hell.
We don't believe in hell.
Right. But if there was one, I would want him to go there.
I've struggled with confidence throughout my life, and I've struggled with shame and internalized transphobia and internalized racism and internalized classism. So I have all that stuff, but there was something in me believed I had something special. Telling the truth to myself about myself is awesome because it's just a relief, because I don't have to like try to be something I'm not. I can just be. Who you are authentically is all right. The shame is what kills you. Believing that you are unworthy of love and belonging, that who you are authentically is a sin or is wrong, is deadly. Who you are is beautiful and amazing. It's important with all of the messages that might tell you otherwise, that you have that in yourself to say that I am beautiful, I'm smart, and I'm amazing.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. Big shout out this week to Angela, Joseph, and Beth. Thank you all so much for believing in us enough to contribute to us financially and for being a part of this movement. Patrons of the Gaytheist Manifesto have access to all sorts of cool stuff like a big shout out on the show, premium content, including an audio journal I've decided to keep documenting the more personal stuff I don't dive into on the show, and an exclusive patrons-only hangout once a month. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto to become a part of this movement and support the show. Thank you. I say all of that to say
anyway.
That, yeah, so that's kind of where I've been with anger lately. So, there's that on top of, my struggling with my weight has kind of come to a head lately. And I get really angry at myself for not being able to get that kind of stuff under control. So anger is something that's kind of been on my mind lately, both kind of in an activist sense and also in a sense of, how I deal with situations in my own life. And it's so interesting when people paint anger like it's a universally bad thing. There's an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I'm just going to nerd out here for a second. So one of the characters in The Next Generation is Data. He's an android. He's incapable of emotion. That's one of his things. And through complicated technological means, he is made to feel anger when he's fighting someone. And he's wrestling with this thing like, wow, if anger's the only thing that I can feel, wouldn't that make me a bad person because anger's a negative emotion? And there's this conversation about, well, there's emotions aren't really inherently negative or positive. There are things that very little good can come from, like hate or jealousy, but it's more about what you do with those kinds of things, than just having it itself. So, the question is, how do we deal with being angry? Do we lash out like I did at that asshole on that Facebook post, or at my former friend Elijah, or do we try and direct it in more quote unquote productive ways? One thing that I kind of said, I talked earlier about a friend of mine who actually posted asking about how anger and how people deal with it, and one of the things that I said is that I own the fact of feeling angry, and that's sometimes a feeling that you have as a person. Just in general, if it's injustice that happens to other people or you, getting a raw deal, somebody does you wrong, like those, I own that emotion, right? I don't allow people to police my anger and make me feel bad for being angry. But when it comes time to act, right? So anger can be a really great spur to action.
Right.
But do we actually want to act directly on that anger? And I think the answer to that question is probably sometimes.
That's exactly what I would say.
And kind of the way that I put it is like, it's like putting a nozzle on a hose, right? Like you get the same amount of water, but it's directed specifically at a specific thing. Like I might, if I'm preparing to talk to a conservative lawmaker about a bathroom bill in Ohio, hypothetically, if that were a thing to happen, I might be really angry when I'm sitting down thinking about what I'm going to say to this guy. And it might make me really mad that he's even considering doing this, because I'm thinking about all of the people that are going to get hurt as a result. Even if the bill doesn't pass, when the bill is introduced and the debate starts, people will get hurt, because that's just what happens, right? Mm-hmm. And that makes me angry. So that may inform what I do, and that may kind of color the conversation. But I'm not going to sit down across from him and be like, what are you doing, you hate-mongering piece of shit? Like, you know what I mean? Because that's not productive, right?
Yeah.
One of the most kind of illuminating conversations that I ever had with a friend of mine is, I sent him a message once and I asked him, I was like, hey, do I come across like too aggressive or too angry on Facebook sometimes when I'm arguing? And he just kind of like nodded emphatically, like, listen, I love you, but yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that can, like, for example, before I was, more knowledgeable about race issues, whenever I saw, like, black people getting really angry, I would be like, oh my gosh, like, why are you so angry? This is turning people off. And it wasn't until I got more involved and more knowledgeable about that sort of issues that I realized that their anger was totally justified. And now when I see that kind of anger, I'm on their side.
Right, exactly. And so what I said to him is I was like, well, but like this thing happened and I'm really angry and I don't think that I should feel wrong for being angry. And he's like, I don't think you're wrong for feeling angry at all. But the question is, when you go into these conversations, what's your goal? Is your goal to just express how you feel? Because if that's your goal, then you have done that perfectly. But if your goal is to change minds, I'm not sure if that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so that really just kind of hit me, and I was like, wow, you know what? Like, maybe he's right. Because, and that was a while ago, kind of more in the context of religious discussions and discussions with believers and that kind of stuff. It wasn't so much about the LGBTQ thing or social justice or anything like that, but obviously, those issues map together. And, and that really kind of made me think, like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to express anger, and it's okay to let your actions be at least informed by being angry. But I think the sad fact is that we have to accept that if we act solely on our anger, we're probably not going to be effective. Yeah. And I don't know who coined the term. I first heard it from Seth Andrews on The Thinking Atheist, but I'm pretty sure he was quoting someone else. That it's not enough to be right. You have to also be effective. And that's something that I always try to keep in mind when we're having conversations like this, is that and the tough thing is, and we talked a little bit about this when we were talking with Kyle Jones, the guy who does Interview an Atheist at Church Day, and because sometimes that approach works, right? Because sometimes you shock someone out of their complacency, you shock someone out of their ignorance, because people feel so comfortable in their position because they live in an area in society, their family, their friends, who are all just reinforcing that they're right about everything. And then when someone comes along and is the opposition to that, that kind of shocks them out of, oh, wow.
And if it doesn't change their mind immediately, it at least gets them thinking about things. Right,
it plants a seed, and that's that's one of the things that I've heard Matt Dillahunty talk about. When somebody asks him, like, if that approach is effective, he's like, I'll show you my email inbox sometime.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really complicated. It's something that I thought was relevant. So let me ask you, Ari, how do you actually deal with anger? Like, how do you react if something, makes you really angry? Is there kind of a general way that you sort of deal with that?
Well, we've talked about similar things before. I forget what we were talking about, but it was something about, like, realizing when I need to step away from certain conversations for my own sake.
Yeah.
I can't for the life of me remember what we were talking about in that instance, but I'm sure people will remember and probably write us and say that's what it was. But
and hopefully they'll say it in that voice.
Yeah. I feel like there's a sweet spot for anger. Like, in psychology, there's a concept called the anxiety curve. And I feel like it's very similar to anger. So if you think about, like, a graph, and one end is 0 anxiety and one end is like 100 anxiety, and you think of, like, an upside down U going across that graph. So if let's say, for example, that you have a test in school and you have, like, 0 to, like, 10% anxiety about it. Well, you're not going to study, you're not going to feel pressured to do much about that. And you might not do very well on the test because you just don't feel a lot of pressure about it. You just don't care. Then on the other extreme end, like, maybe you're like 80 to 100% anxious about it. You're so anxious that you can't think straight. You're just so nervous. You can't study. You can't do anything. You can't sleep. You can't eat. And then you probably don't do well on that test because you're too anxious about it. But then in the middle, there's a sweet spot where it's just that right amount of anxiety where it motivates you to do something so that you don't have any kind of negative consequences. But at the same time, it's not a crippling level of anxiety. And that's something that if you've been through therapy for anxiety, your therapist might have talked about this with you. It's that you are too much on this end of the scale, and we want to get you more to the middle of the scale as opposed to at the other extreme end of the scale, because that's also not adaptive. So I feel like anger could possibly be the same way. Like, if you're not angry at all about anything, then you might not have a lot of motivation. If you're too angry, then you're just getting upset and you're hurting yourself and you're hurting people around you. But there's a middle sweet spot where you have the motivation from the anger, but you're not so angry that you're hurting anybody. So
Man.
I just try and gauge myself on that kind of a scale. And it also, again, depends on how I'm feeling that day. a lot of times I'll see something online or hear something in conversation that makes me angry, but I'm just like, I just can't do this right now. And it's okay for it to not be your time to say something. It's okay to let other people handle it if you don't feel that you're up to it at that moment, because you don't want to hurt yourself and you don't want to hurt the conversation or the person who's trying to have that conversation. So I just try and gauge that. And, a lot of times it's really difficult. I don't get angry very often, but when I do have a tendency to lash out at people, even people that don't deserve it. So I'm just, I just try and take a step back, take a breath, just, analyze the situation. Would it really be helpful for me to respond in anger to this, or would it be more helpful for me to come back to it later when I'm not feeling so angry? So it's just a case-by-case situation, really.
Man, Ari, that shit right there is why I am so glad that you were on this show now. I mean, there are other reasons, obviously, but that's that's awesome. I've never heard it put that way. Because there's just not an experience that I've had where I've had to work through that. But I mean, it makes so much sense. Be on there's a continuum where there's too little, there's too much, and you kind of want to, because I think when we associate those things as being negative, we tend to think that what that means then is that we have to get rid of them completely.
Exactly.
We're not allowed to feel them even a little bit, because if we feel them even a little bit, then it's just going to snowball, and then eventually we're going to be right back to where we were. So we have to cut that shit out completely. And I feel like that's probably just as unhealthy as just embracing feeling it too much. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Man.
Words.
Yeah. You're super smart. I really like you.
Oh, thanks.
Not just
I
because
guess I'll have to accept that.
Not just because. See what this is? This is the antithesis to 2 episodes ago where I was really mean.
Exactly.
I want to be really
so
nice
mean.
because.
Nice.
Because
I think I prefer mean, Callie, because then I don't have to accept any compliment.
When I was editing that episode, I was like, wow, God, I was an asshole. I really need to chill out on that.
See, you need to learn to control your anger and not lash out at your innocent co-host who has done nothing wrong.
Oh God, that's true. Well, before we wrap the episode up completely here, I want to do kind of a quick update on kind of what's going on. If anyone who is listening is going to be at the American Humanist Association convention this weekend, so the weekend of
By the time it comes out.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be the weekend of the 27th, 28th, and 29th. Anybody who's going to be in Chicago for AHA Con, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be giving a talk. We're going to be recording an episode of the show there. So if you're going to be there, definitely come hang out. I want to say hi. I want to meet everyone.
Be there wandering around the hotel because I can't afford the tickets to the conference.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's we're probably going to have a conversation about that on the show at some point. Mention.
Do we really need more drama in the atheist community, Callie?
Well, yeah. Mentioned at the top of the show that we are going to be at the Reason Rally. Ari and I are both going to be there. Celeste will be there. I mean, there's going to be a shit ton of people there that are from this. If you want to
talk to me, you'll have to deal with me snuggling with Jeremiah the whole time. So bring your barf bags.
I'm going to bring like 10.
This is payback, Callie.
Yeah, well, I was going to say I'm going to bring extra for you. So like I said, if you've got a story you want to tell on the show that you think is relevant, get a hold of us, thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. We want to hear your stories. That's, telling stories and humanizing things and humanizing people. That's what we're about. So definitely please reach out there.
Humanize cats and dogs.
Exactly. Yeah. We want to humanize things too. So like this deodorant that's on my desk here is now a person.
Deserves human rights.
The other thing to know is that the Gaytheist Manifesto is now a blog.
We're famous.
Yeah, so the fine folks at Pathos Atheist have seen fit to give us some space on Pathos to talk about the issues that we talk about on the podcast. So you'll see postings there from Ari and I both. It's pathos.com/blogs/The Gaytheist Manifesto. We're going to do some cool stuff. We've got some cool articles in the works. I'm also going to try and I've noticed that the Thinking Atheist does a discussion thread on Free Thought blogs for all their episodes. So I'm going to try that for the next couple episodes and see what we get. See if we can generate some discussion, maybe bring some new folks into the fold. So that's cool. Check the blog out if reading blogs is your thing. I know sometimes people would rather read things than they would listen to people talk on microphones and vice versa. So hopefully it'll bring some new folks into the fold. So, Ari, is that all you
There are also people who talk on podcasts even though they're terrible at speaking impromptu and speak much better in writing. So this is good news for me.
Stop it. You're much better at that than you think you are. And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. Thank you, Ari.
I'm pissed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm angry because we were just talking about
you were bringing it back around.
But I'm better now because I stepped back and decided that it probably was not a good idea to yell at you. So now I'm better. Yay.
It was good to see that whole process in action there. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
And from the top of the show, again, I want to thank our guest Emily for being open with her story and sharing with us, because I think that's a super important perspective to get. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie.
Let us pray.
Oh, God.
Our Ari, who art in central Illinois, hallowed be thy snack stash, which Zach needs to stay out of, goddammit. Thy kitty cat come, thy snuggling be done, on the couch as it is in bed. Give us this day our daily Facebook post on the Ari Stillman page, and forgive us our binarist way of thinking, as we forgive those who say something kind of rude and problematic but didn't really mean it that way. And lead us not into confusion with your weird pronouns, but deliver us from ignorance by answering the emails we send to aristillman4@gmail.com. For thine is the skinny jeans and the button-downs and the Sperry's forever. Ramen.
Oh, God. I really hope that this is a thing that continues to happen on every episode, as much as I pretend like I hate it. God. Okay, so... You can also find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists. If you want to support the work we do, you can head to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto and make a per episode donation to support the production of the show and the activism that we do. Quick shout out to our patrons. We are literally $1 away from our goal of $100 an episode. So super, super awesome. Again, that's the reason why my voice sounds so awesome now is I was able to get a better microphone. It all helps with traveling and all of that kind of stuff. So, thank you to everyone listening who supports the show financially. Cannot thank you enough. You're really, really helping make things happen. It's not just, it's not just about being part of a community or giving someone money. You're literally making activism happen. So, that's awesome. And thank you. And then if you can't support financially, that's cool. Money's tight. I get it. You can go to iTunes and you can leave us a 5-star rating, and that, helps us kind of raise through the ranks and get heard by more people. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.